But we're going to begin this half hour with the growing backlash against the TSA's decision to allow passengers to carry small knives on planes starting next month. The head of the TSA is hearing it from all sides now, including the nation's flight attendants. We're going to talk to him exclusively. But first, NBC's Tom Costello is at Reagan National Airport for us this morning. Tom, good morning.
Hi, Savannah. Good morning to you. The TSA continues to insist it will allow these small folding knives about 2.36 inches on the blade, no bigger than that, because the TSA says they pose little risk because looking for them clogs up checkpoints like this one, and because the TSA says it needs to be looking for explosives. But the agency is also now facing a tsunami of protest. First, it was the frequent flyers who found the TSA's new knife policy unsettling.
I don't know why they would allow people to carry knives on the plane. I mean, it's just ridiculous to me.
Now mounting opposition from all of the key players in aviation safety, the union representing the 45,000 TSA officers.
We are opposed to it. We believe there is no place for knives on airplanes.
The union representing air marshals also opposes the plan. So does a coalition of airline pilots associations and 5 unions representing the nation's flight attendants. Wednesday, they took their concerns directly to the TSA chief.
Every single day we experience passenger disturbances that we de-escalate or ask passengers to help us to contain the problem. You introduce a deadly weapon into that scenario and it's simply not a good idea.
Meanwhile, at least 3 major airlines are joining their unions in objecting to the TSA's decision: U.S. Airways, American, and Delta. In a letter to the head of the TSA, Delta Airlines CEO writes, "If the purpose is to increase security checkpoint flow, there are much more effective steps we can take together. But scissors and knitting needles are already permitted with no reported problems. Small knives are allowed on many flights overseas. And the man who runs the TSA says terrorists remain focused on using explosives to bring down a plane, not knives."
I understand the concerns of some of the constituents out there. Our focus has to be on making sure we're best poised to detect and deter a possible terrorist who's at a checkpoint.
This morning, TSA Chief Pistol will be on Capitol Hill defending this plan. Some Republicans support him, but there is also a bipartisan bill on Capitol Hill that would prevent the TSA from putting this plan into action. Savannah?
All right, Tom Costello, thank you. And let's hear from the man himself. John Pistol, the administrator of the TSA, is with us exclusively this morning. Sir, good morning to you.
Good morning, Savannah.
Well, we just heard you're taking a lot of heat for this change in policy. And I guess the first question a lot of people have is, why fix it if it ain't broke? Flying public is used to these rules. Why the change in policy?
Yeah, the policies have been under revision and review for a number of years, really since TSA was stood up after 9/11. And this is part of our ongoing initiative, which we call risk-based security, to really move away from the one-size-fits-all approach that was stood up by necessity after 9/11 to help us focus on the highest threat items, such as the non-metallic improvised explosive devices, those underwear bombs, those other liquid bombs that can bring down an aircraft. And as was noted by Tom Costello, the fact is that since 2005, we've had a number of items that have been allowed on aircraft, and there's been billions of passengers in the U.S. who have traveled. And since August of 2010, billions of passengers internationally who have traveled with these small knives, and not a single incident involving a threat to an air crew. And we recognize the concerns of the flight attendants and those others who have raised concerns. That's why we have been in a close partnership with them. Well, for example, allowing them to go through an identity-based screening so they don't even go through regular screening anymore. 95% of those the flight attendants go through an identity-based screening.
Let's take this piece by piece. I mean, I guess the question is, the organization not capable of both watching for and confiscating knives and watching for these improvised explosive devices that admittedly pose more of a catastrophic threat? Why can't the agency do both?
Well, we can and we have. The challenge becomes if we focus on something that will not cause a catastrophic failure to an aircraft and miss something that could, then we haven't done our job to the millions of people, 12.5 million people who travel every week, 630 million people every year just in the U.S.
It's a
so I want our focus to be on the highest threat items.
Fair enough. But now you have TSA screeners, the union that represents the screeners themselves, saying, in fact, this new policy is more disruptive because now, rather than just a hard and fast no knives rule, you have set up a situation where they're going to be litigating potentially with passengers how big the knife is. Is it less than 2 1/3 inches long? So isn't this actually more disruptive and counter to your goals here?
Well, if they were aware of the protocols that we will be putting in place, I don't think they would have that opinion. I received input from the workforce prior to us having a collective bargaining agreement with the union, and it was actually a recommendation from the workforce that we modify this list. And as the protocols become apparent to all, I think people see that we won't have that situation, just as in 2005 with the change in the list. There was a transition period, and it's gone smoothly since then.
Another thing that people have been mentioning and that they're very scared about is that while they acknowledge a small knife isn't going to cause a catastrophic event like the plane being brought down, can't you envision a scenario in which it is incredibly dangerous, where you have a coordinated group of terrorists, like on 9/11, getting on with some of these knives and causing great havoc among passengers and flight attendants? I mean, isn't that a real threat, and perhaps threatening to hijack the plane on that basis?
It is a possibility. So part of what we do is base our decisions on the intelligence that's out there. There's intelligence about terrorists continuing their interest and attempts to blow up an aircraft, whether passenger or cargo planes, as we've seen in 3 plots since Christmas Day. There's no intelligence about that scenario that you described. The TSA is really at one end of the continuum for the national security for the United States, with other agencies collecting intelligence overseas, others doing things here domestically, and then we are really that last line of defense with the federal air marshals, with the pilots and flight attendants, and the passengers, who I think will respond in a different way than what people may be imagining.
Well, I know you've been getting it from all sides, and you're going on the Hill this morning to defend the policy. Sir, thank you for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Savannah.